Regional Agreement Committee meeting of February 13th, 2023. As we start all meetings, would you please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we did have some minutes in the drive, so I would entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes of January 30th, 2023. Oh, sorry. We can start with public comment. Well, we'll do the minutes first. That would be fun. So moved. Second. Any discussion on the minutes? Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Great. Sorry. And thank you. And now we'll go to public comment. Is anyone here for public comment? Are you here for public comment, listening, or?
Yeah.
Come on up.
Thanks. Don Byers, 20 Russell Road, Whitman, and school committee member. I'm here to share some information with the committee in regards to the lease topic. I do sit on the subcommittee for operations and capital with the school committee, and I've been contacted by Hanson Park and Recreation with some great news. So it involves upgrading fields at Hanson Middle School. The information goes back to actually last year. So in the state budget, Senator Brady was able to secure $200,000 for the town of Hanson, and it names Hanson Fields at Hanson Middle School. Also, I've been informed that the Hanson Community Preservation Committee just recently approved $200,000 also at the request of the Park and Fields for Hanson to add to that. So it's a total of $400,000. Which is really exciting news. I'm glad to hear that, and want to make sure that the district works in collaboration with the town when you discuss wording of the lease and maintenance of these fields and upkeep. I've watched some of your past meetings, and I know a lot of conversation is around the players and the people sitting at the tables right now may not be here in 5, 10, 15 years. So what does that future maintenance look like of new fields? Because, after the first few years, just cutting the grasses will probably suffice, but after that. So I know that in the Whitman town lease, there's language about, town maintaining and upkeeping. It doesn't necessarily outline what that would be. But my hope is that, again, I stand here as a, chair of the subcommittee for facilities and operations, and hope that, there may be a future agenda where that includes, plans for how these funds are used to upgrade fields at Hanson Middle School, and how the town of Hanson would be, impacted going forward with that. So I share that as knowledge as we begin to discuss leases. And I just wanted to add a comment also, and I won't share any personal opinions, I'll save those for school committee and so forth, but on the topic of 2/3 vote, I don't know, I've been watching some meetings in the past, I don't know if this committee collectively has discussed the 2/3 vote, or that it was just brought forward as a topic and then going to be brought back at a future date. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
John. All right. So we can kind of jump back into going through what we've done. So just to refresh, so the document that you have in front of you that looks like this, and it's the one that says open items, ongoing discussion. This is the one where you should have it. You have it, right? And you got a copy? Or you of course. Yeah. You either have it electronically or in hard copy. But basically just made some updates. So the goal here, so we have open items, just to kind of all be on the same page. So open items are transportation, which the superintendent will be presenting at school committee on this Wednesday at 2:15. That meeting is posted for 6:30. There's an executive session at the very beginning. We anticipate the executive session will take about 15 minutes. So somewhere around 10, we try to do transportation earlier in the agenda because there are a number of folks interested in that. So just if you want to hear it live, probably around 6:45 or so, as soon as we're done with that executive session. And then we can come back to that subsequently once we kind of see the presentation. Leases we need to still talk about, and we'll spend some time talking about leases tonight. Timing of payments is also open. I think everyone is kind of taking that away to their respective towns and communities to try and understand kind of the cash flow of when funds come in and what that looks like. That's what we talked about, and then John's going to be the same with district. So those are kind of our open items. And then what I tried to do, again, based upon the feedback of what we've talked about is from where it says draft committee is still finalizing consensus items to bring back to respective boards and committees and feedback. That document is, or that section is what I'm hoping we can turn into a document that we can all then take away and bring back. So as we kind of talk through this, think about this document, or think about this section as something that would go into a document that we can take away. We can kind of start to jump into what we have so far. So item 1 is representation. So we discussed representation in the Mass law, which is included as an appendix, and the suggestion of committee members, this committee suggesting requiring or considering required 2/3 vote for all school committee votes. So that would be an item to answer kind of, I think, the question that Ms. Byers just had, that would be on this document that we would all take away. So the way I would anticipate this working in the school committee is we're going to have this document, we're going to say representation. We talked about a 2/3 vote. What do you think? We're going to get feedback, and then once the Hanson Select Board, Whitman Board of Selectmen, the Whitman FinCom, the Hanson FinCom have all met, they're going to take the notes, and we're going to come back and talk about what was that consensus. Is this something that makes sense, pros, cons, and then we'll kind of have to do this. So item 1 is representation. That sound good? That kind of, again, we're not, our job isn't to vote on it necessarily. Our job is to come up with the item to take back to get feedback. Then the agreement review is item number 2. So this committee discussed having language within the agreement requiring the agreement to be reviewed every 3 years. There's some proposed language in here. It's not been legally reviewed, but basically it talks about the process for the agreement to be reviewed every 3 years within those respective boards, the school committee, the selectmen, the select board, and having to go on the agenda, basically, and then everyone has to look at it. And any one of those groups can then say, hey, there's something here, which would then kick off kind of reconvening a regional agreement. So there's some language in there. If you all want to take a moment to read it, see if that, I'll give you all a moment to read it, see if that makes sense. And again, we're not finalizing the language. This would be the language we're going to take away. But everyone want to kind of look at that proposed language and see if that is okay for what we want to take away, or give her 1 minute to reread it.
I guess a question, and probably could just reference the regional agreement, but elsewhere in the regional agreement, do we usually call out specific towns and their boards, or do we say each member town shall make that?
Good point. So I think if we're going with the 2018 agreement, I think it's member towns, but I can take a look at that and try and make sure the language is consistent with the 2018 proposed language. That's a good point. Again, I think I get a little, I'm kind of almost reluctant to start to share proposed language because it hasn't been legally reviewed, but I think like with this one, if we don't kind of put some language together, you're going to miss the concept. So I can certainly take a look and see how to try and make it consistent with the 2018 language, but at the same time, I'm also thinking like if we were to take this away in a document, again, your explanation would be like, don't get totally hung up on the exact language. It hasn't been legally reviewed, but conceptually, does this make sense? Is it 3 years? Is it September? That type of thing. Does that make sense? But I can look at that. Anyone else on that?
I just think it's awkward between having a board of selectmen and a select board. Because I tried that with the lease, I said, I'll do it once and never talk about it.
You'll be excited to see an article town this year.
Oh, maybe great. So by the time we'll have to fix it again.
That's always caught.
I literally stole the exact language.
But you know what? So,
Change the town.
there's an easy way to deal with that, which is probably at the very beginning of the agreement, we can introduce the definitions that say, the Hanson Select Board or whatever they're called in the future, and the Whitman Board of Selectmen or whatever they're called in the future, and then just kind of come up with a, whether it's member or board or whatever. So we can do that. Good point. Anything else? Okay. So leases, which I think I want to try and, if you're willing, kind of take in a couple parts. So The lease language that you have in front of you here is from the 2018 agreement, and the first section is 3B, which is the lease language that was within the 2018 agreement. What we talked about as this committee is trying, Lisa and I think both took a shot at trying to articulate this. We wanted to be careful that there wasn't any language in the lease that would then conflict with what we talked about in emergency repairs, which we're going to address in the next section. So the only language that I saw, and again, we have this legally reviewed, was that middle paragraph. It's highlighted and stricken, where it says the committee shall also be authorized to make major improvements, alterations, additions, or capital expenditures to town-owned schools, but only after notification of the appropriate member towns. Selectmen approved projects will not be part of the district budget. The reason that I think we can strike all of that is because we're going to address it in the next section. And if we don't strike it, then we're going to have some conflict between this section and that section. Other than that, when I read it, and again, we'll have an attorney look at this, I didn't see anything jumping out in this section. And maybe we'll talk about something a little later tonight that we have to go back. There wasn't anything else that I saw in this section that seemed to be a major issue with conflicting. So I don't know if everyone else had a chance to look at that, we're okay for now.
To the extent that this is an improvement, yes, but it definitely needs to contain the language specific to the Whitman Middle School fields and athletic, the gymnasium. I mean, that was big.
So we'll come, right, so I think we got to come back, we'll come back to that in a second. So this section is going to need to address what you sent us, agreed. And then maybe even what Ms. Myers just suggested in terms of who maintains fields. But it's okay for now, yes? Okay. So the next section, which is capital emergency repairs, again, just kind of lifted this from the 2018 agreement. What we had talked about last time as this committee was specific, I think, capital costs should be delineated at $10,000. So if you look at number 3 there, we're just removing where it said 5,000, we're suggesting removing 5,000 and making it 10,000. That would be for capital repairs. Good? Okay. And then we added this emergency repair section, which is section 5. And I'll read this one. An emergency repair shall be defined as a repair not covered by insurance, costing greater than $10,000. I should say greater than or equal, sorry. Or equal to $10,000 that poses an immediate impact or risk to the safety of the district students or staff, or threatens the operation of a school building, or is required to comply with the law. In the event of an emergency repair, the school district shall notify the appropriate member town or towns that own the buildings as soon as reasonably practical, but not later than within 72 hours of having knowledge of the need for the emergency repair. The member town shall be responsible for the cost and reimbursement to the school district. I think that's what we talked about. Again, you guys help. I'm trying to turn into words what we talked about, but feel free to poke holes if it's not clear.
My only concern is the word impact. Anything that threatens the safety of the district students and staff and threatens the operations
I can see that.
should be sufficient. Once we start getting into impact, it can be anything.
Or is required. That poses an immediate risk, or how do you? What do you
Immediate
say?
Risk to the safety of the district students and staff.
So just get rid of impact.
Just strike the word impact or.
That's fine. I hear your point. Is that good with everyone else?
Yeah.
Right. And again, I'm sure this is going to get tweaked at least a dozen times between now and when it's done, but it kind of gives, hopefully the reader, and just like Frank's right now, we might take it to whatever, someone on the Whitman or Hanson select boards or FinCom might say, wait a second, I'm reading it this way, did you mean this? And we'll bring it back. Okay, so that kind of hopefully gives us some language for emergency repairs. Everyone's good? I see nodding heads. Yes. Okay. The next section, number 5, was operating cost methodology, and this was the statutory methodology. So all I did was take the exact language from the amendment. This is exactly what we talked about last time, less the transition language. So the amendment had that language was like for this year, for FY, whatever, we're going to do half and half. and then going, so I just took the going forward language and it's basically the same that was in the 2018 agreement. The only thing that was in the 2018 agreement that kind of stood out and I wanted to talk to you was number 3, which says special operating costs include costs unique to a particular town for maintaining programs or services. These costs will be borne by the particular member town. So the only 2 things I could think of that fell here were transportation and emergency repairs. And I think we're going to deal with transportation and emergency repairs elsewhere. So I don't know, I may be missing something. So
Who was back in 18? Because this was in the 18 amendment, right? That language?
I think it was probably transportation.
It's transportation, and I think this, given where I think I want to take transportation discussion when we as a committee discuss it, I referenced identifying transportation as a special operating cost, so it has to be someplace in the reference. So I keep it there for now, and I'm clear up.
Yeah, and I wasn't suggesting we need to delete it. I just wanted to call attention to it
Yeah.
because I think this is an interesting little clause here that we've got to pay attention to because depending on how we handle, what I think when I was reading this back in 18 or up to this point, I saw special operating costs and I would immediately think of emergency repairs. That was kind of my first thought. Like, okay, a special operating cost is a special repair on a building, it's expensive, it needs to be resolved. Well, we now have a whole section that kind of takes this out of here. But to your point, transportation is, either we need to deal with transportation language independently, or this is going to be it. So, but I guess, can anyone think of a special operating cost outside of transportation or emergency repair?
I think it would create an equity issue between schools and 2 towns.
Right.
Can't run curriculum in one town, not the other.
And again, so and some of those equity issues while I think common sense would have prevailed back in the 90s, I'm not sure they would have been defined to the extent they are now. I don't know.
Would it be anything to do with, for example, the paving of a certain school in a town? Or like they just talked about the fields in like Hanson, or the basketball court behind Hanson Mill. You know what I mean? That's particular to a program at a time. I don't know, I'm trying to think like what is else other than transportation? Because
You should still get into the issue of capital.
Right.
So
yeah, good point. Yeah,
that would define it.
Yeah.
Right. So I think we need to, I'm going to leave it highlighted. I think we need to come back to this section and see if it's still relevant. I can understand, for me, I can understand why it was relevant in 1992 and maybe even 2018, but I think where we're going now, it may not. You saw something?
Just thinking maybe an operating cost would be crossing guards.
The town, it's under the police department equipment, so it's not
I don't think it was back.
It wasn't back.
Yeah, so again, there's probably reasons that this was here. Again, I'm not sure. And maybe this is even a discussion point that we bring back to, again, our respective boards. Maybe someone can think of something that we're not thinking of. But I just don't want to keep language in here. If we're like, well, we have it. We think we addressed it. Now we're going to keep it in here even though we don't know what it means. That's going to come back and bite us. So.
Someone will find a special cost.
Correct. One that we didn't anticipate, and now we'll be dealing with it. So, okay. So that's kind of where we got up to this point. But let's go back to Lisa's because the other item was, and I'm going to kind of just let Kathleen work through this and then Frank. So Kathleen had volunteered in our last meeting to kind of look at some of the specific lease language. So there's 3 other documents. One of them is the 1992 agreement. This is kind of what Kathleen prepared, and then we have copies, I think, of the lease between Hanson and Whitman. So Kathleen, you want to kind of share thinking where we're at?
Just that the original lease from 1992, the original agreement, amended agreement 92, specifically has schools that no longer are. So that needs to be cleared up.
Right.
And so those I changed in the first page of this document. And then we got into there were in some of the agreements, there were 20-year leases, and another there was a 50-year lease, so that time of lease needs to be determined. I think we want to go with 50, but that the 1992 between Hanson and the region is 20 years, and I think the 1998 between Whitman and the region is 50 years.
The reason for that was an MSP requirement when we were doing renovations to the Whitman elementary schools.
And then we get into the Whitman lease language on non-exclusive rights to fields. And that's not part of the Hanson lease. And unless I'm wrong, I believe that maybe this gets resolved at the middle school building committee level when the lease with the MSBA is signed. But that language needs to be maintained someplace. And the last thing I included was the 2018 proposed amendment language, lease at the elementary and middle schools.
So Kathleen, the way, again, we can approach it however, because I don't want to miss anything, but what I've tried to do is default to the 2018 language, and then amend that, just because, again, it went through a lot of set of lives, but, so if we focus on the 2018 language, what do you think we need to address? What do we have to add back? Because that does pull out, for example, like the listing of schools, which I think is smart. Like, let's not list them all because we're going to be doing this, right? Like, can you think of maybe how we could attack the 2018 language to address?
Since that's the last part of the document
Yeah.
that's in here, that, starting off with that is fine, but then somehow incorporate the section 17, non-exclusive rights to fields.
Perfect. Okay. And 17 would be the only missing piece?
That's the only difference between the Whitman document and the Hanson document. Everything else lines up perfectly, but Hanson's section 17 is like right to enjoy peace and quiet. And in Whitman, it's section 18 because we insert section 17 field language.
So this is kind of, again, this kind of falls in line with public comment as well, but so what do we want to try and tackle within the regional agreement as it pertains to field maintenance, utilization, rights, thoughts? You don't want to tackle it, but we have to, yes. And slowly. Folks have thoughts? Because I see the way that this one, I mean, so what is, I guess, maybe help from a contextual standpoint, maybe I'll defer to the women folks. So the non-exclusive rights to field section 12 is here. Which is very specific to the middle school soccer field, the gymnasium, and then the athletic and recreational fields, including the middle school soccer field. Are we thinking that's something that we should be addressing at that level of detail, or some level of detail? What are folks thinking? Or I guess maybe what's current practice of it? I know we probably have a little current practice. Or do we even have a defined current practice of it?
Frank, I think this is the current practice as far as I know. Jack handles renting out fields and one field belongs to each
Pretty
side.
much when school is in session, purchase.
So it's always taken place that Whitman Youth Soccer would apply to the recreation department for the field permit for their field for X amount. Schools could never touch that. And then after 4 o'clock, there was always that good faith effort that said that they would turn over to towns for their practices for these teams. There have been instances, obviously, where there was a cross-country meet, we talked, and we might have moved to practice or whatever. As far as what's taking place on the inside of the building, school had precedent for a school event over youth leagues. However, youth basketball and then travel, the outgrowth of that, always had it basically Monday through Sunday all the time. So the gymnasium never had access. When it came to after 4 o'clock, on game days it was after 5 o'clock if the interscholastic team had a game. But it was always worked out that town soccer would go to the town, they'd own the lease to that fenced-in field. They would then lease all of the other soccer fields in the back, just like baseball and softball will, provided that you didn't interfere with the operation of the school and/or their events. On the inside, it was always, the youth leagues just worked with the school. It fell under school building use. We only charged for the Saturday custodial fees, but they worked with the school directly because it was the building. So we do, like, if there was a dance in the middle school, they couldn't practice that night, or if there was games, whatever it was. then it always worked out. I mean, there's never been an issue. As far as the soccer field with the fence, we would sometimes use it on our field day for tug of war, because you put the whole school in a closed area, nobody would run away and see. But we would just ask soccer. So like I would go to a meeting or whatever, bring it to their board and say, do you think on this day we can use it for that?
That was outside school hours? Or
No, that was during school hours. So if there was ever, because it mentions if there's like a special thing, we had to ask them. So that was the only time when we just asked the board and they allowed it. But like phys ed classes never went there, any of that. That was never on
Fence on it, so that one-
Yeah, that the fenced in soccer field, because that was theirs.
That was the gold standard on that.
And Hanson, what do we do in Hanson?
Hanson schools use their fields all during the day. Hanson, since that pitch is so bad on that field, they all moved to Robeson Street, or that, those fields for soccer, and really, I haven't seen anyone or heard of anyone really on the fields themselves for years. The school still uses it for, recess, they still use it for phys ed, but they don't really go. I don't think they book sports in Hanson at the middle school for probably 10, 12 years. I mean,
But the elementary uses youth football, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
have football is at Indian.
Yep, after school hours, I think it starts at 5.
And, I mean, just for my 2 cents, we never had a problem when I was running girls softball, but as the numbers dwindle, the middle school field, I didn't need, so it was just a practice type thing, and we never had a problem, starting at 4 o'clock. And now that we have Lower Robinson, or now that they have Lower Robinson, we have 2 full-time, fields in town. And, as a matter of fact, it's with Whitman now too, so it's worked out good. I think
There were no issues with the school. The only issues that ever occurred were the groups themselves arguing over who was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Right, yes, that does happen.
And there were times when there used to be a flag football league on Sunday morning. Those guys drank a lot of honey.
We have somebody looking to start that up again.
Yeah, and that was booked through the town rec on the fields at Woodmanville. So that was just handled through there.
Don, you got something else?
If I may add a comment, what I'm hearing is more conversation and cooperation about use and timing of the fields. My concern, and this will now be my personal comment as a parent, is maintenance of the field and the upkeep, years down the road. So the situation I just observed and spoke with Whitman Youth Soccer about this past summer, when they invested $40,000 into the field at Whitman Middle School, which is not that fenced-in field. So the way the lease is written, it does specify, they've named that Jackson Field now, it's in the fence, and that Whitman Youth Soccer has paid and maintained that. The investment was done to a second field, which, according to the lease, is to be maintained and upkept by the town of Whitman. So my personal comment is, I had a child who played Whitman Youth Soccer, I had paid registration dues and fees to be part of that, and Whitman Youth Soccer just invested money from their bank to this town field. So I feel as a taxpayer, as a parent, that should have been upkept and maintained by the town. Now, whose definition of upkeep and maintain, that's a lot of gray area. So that's really what I'm looking to this committee and other committees as we write this lease. I don't know how granular you can get with a definition of upkeep and maintain. I know the district maintains the fields by mowing the grass, and that's what they do. And when it comes down to lining the fields, fertilizing, aerating, really keeping it safe for users, and that's why Whitman Youth Soccer, when I spoke with Stephanie Blackman, spoke with Helen Hyano, player safety was first and not most, because someone would turn an ankle, there were divots, it was so forth. So they said, we want to make this field right for the players. So that's important. So I hope that the conversation would come. I don't know where the granularity is, but it's the maintenance piece. I think that needs some attention.
Got it. Yeah, and certainly if there are new fields that are getting investment, then it's right, the same issue. Okay, I've got a new field, how do we take care of it? So, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, no.
Don actually has an excellent point, which would coincide with why I think this needs to be reviewed every 3 years. Is because now we have a situation with youth fields, and we may not have the right answer tonight or when we put this agreement together. But as, you know, a youth leader with, you know, with sports in town, that could change.
Yeah, and actually, if I may add, when I spoke with one of the Park and Recreation members in Hanson, who is involved with youth sports, and was absolutely confident, we do this, we take care of it, it's always worked out well, right? And I said, yes, but in 5, 10 years, your child's gonna age out of that program, and you're gonna want another volunteer to step up and be as excited and energetic and enthusiastic to do the same thing you're doing, and they may not. They may look at that piece of paper and go, why are we doing this? We shouldn't be, the town should be doing this, school should be doing this. And I heard those conversations the past 6 months when it was, we've asked the district to maintain the fields, but they say it's not us. And I said, well, the district's right, it's not, because the Whitman lease says the town shall keep and maintain. So absolutely, thanks, Mr. Hickey, you know, for recognizing the same people won't be here, and those confidence and that cooperation, the energy might not be there. So pointing fingers, I don't want there to be pointing fingers, you know.
Right, exactly.
You'll never be able to stop that.
And I know who Don is talking about, and he is very energetic, and they have a budget, and they have the town fields irrigated, and, you know, the sprinkler system is all set up, and they put money towards it, and basically, you know, the town just mows it. You know, the DPW, or in our case, the highway department. So there has to be something in there. Not that we need to figure this out tonight or tomorrow or anything, but, you
No,
know,
and there's the
looking into
inside,
the
and there's the,
future.
right, so I think, right, if we take a step back, there's the inside and the outside, right? So there's the inside of the buildings and the outside of the buildings, right? And so we probably can think of it, bucket them into those two pieces, because auditoriums and things like that are inside, and then are gonna require a whole separate set of
And you
maintenance.
also can bucket it out by access, time of access.
Yeah, exactly, so I think we got inside, outside, and then, right, we have during school and outside of school, right?
And then maintenance, you know?
And then we have
access and
maintenance, right, and but it gets complex because, and again, I'm not suggesting he was not doing a good job at it, I just think it's one of those things that we've kind of just gone through, but if you have a group that's maybe charging fees, then like, how does that fit in, right? Like, so, like, how does that all align, where do those fees go, right? Like, I don't know, I'm a simplistic person, so if someone's charging a fee, then that should probably go to the maintenance, and like, it should, right, it should, like, otherwise, where is that happening? Whether it's the school district or the town, if it's like, well, this is ours, and we're gonna let you use it, and then you're gonna charge a fee, again, like, how does that work, how is that fair, how is it open for everyone? But I think some of that is certainly gonna be beyond our scope, because I think at the end of the day, some of those fields are town owned, right? So again, like, I don't know how far we get into trying to resolve some of those issues. With the understanding we've got to resolve them at some point, but I'm not sure how much that's being done or not. So when I think of it, it's inside, outside, school time, outside, school time. Is there a way we can kind of construct something there in a simplistic fashion of, and so what happens today, I hesitate to ask the question, so what happens like if we have an auditorium and it's being used outside of school time? Sometimes we charge use fees on those?
In the case of Hanson Middle, there used to be charge fees, yeah. Like if you just talk about one town.
And the fees would go to the
The fees
district
go-
or the town?
The fees right now go to the school building use committee. So
But the school's also responsible for the maintenance.
Right, the school's responsible.
Okay.
Right.
So maybe that's how you align it.
Right.
So then, George, how has that changed since COVID?
Since COVID, we're back to renting out the facility. During COVID, we weren't, because we couldn't, we just.
Right.
But since then, it's reverted back to, so the Hanson Middle School the Hanson Middle School auditorium is mostly used for Hanson elected officials. That's the most. But there are some times when small dance groups or something want to use the area because they're not as big to come here. So that is, they have to fill out the form, they have to tell us they're insurance carriers, we have a fee structure, and then we have to maintain it as far as what kind of equipment they need, technology, whatever, and then they pay the district, and it goes into the school building use fund account.
And that would be the same for the gymnasium.
Same for the gymnasium. What happens for the gymnasium, it's like that happens in Whitman, is that nobody's charged during the week because the custodians are on duty anyway. So you guys get out maybe 40 minutes before the end of their shift, they clean up and that's that. On Saturdays, you're only charged for the maintenance and upkeep to pay them to be there all day. Because it's like overtime. So that's all you're charged for. But you're not charged for the electricity aspect and things like that.
Chris, did you have something? Sorry.
But that's because you're a town. If you're a for-profit business, it's different.
Okay.
Yeah, there's different tiers.
And then if, like a Destination Imagination, which has been here a few times and taken over whole chunks of the building,
Yeah.
is it just another fee?
That's another layer,
Another
yeah.
charge?
Yeah. Do you have a fee structure that's based on what you're using? So if you're using the calf, it's this. If you're using the calf, but you have an overflow of play, you're using the stage, then you need the calf to put kids. That's another thing, because you need another person to clean it and do all that. So it really depends on what the needs that you are, what the needs you have. Sometimes there is cost sharing, if it's especially the high school, if like there's like wrestling and something else, but it all depends on the areas that are open and available to rent, and then the needs of the company that's using it. But there's 3 tiers. There's like town, then there's nonprofit, then there's for-profit. There's multiple tiers to who you are.
So thinking of the schools on an external basis, are the fields used in any of the schools? The outside, is anything, what's used outside during school hours?
During school hours, the fields.
Recess, yeah.
Recess and phys ed. So recess and phys ed are using the fields. Not so much at Whitman Middle for all the areas at the elementaries. Playgrounds, all the areas. Conley, they use both fields, the lower fields and everything. But if you're talking about Whitman Middle, occasionally they use, if it's a special thing, they'll use the baseball fields, usually it's the softball field if they have a school event or something like that. But it's usually just the regular fields. If it's at Hanson Middle, the same thing. After school, the only thing it's used for is if they sometimes host 1 or 2 like cross-country meets in the fall. They travel to each school. During COVID, the kids ran by themselves. Every team ran by themselves, and then they virtually compare the scores. But they will do that based on the attendance. When it comes to the regular track seasons at the middle schools, if they have a meet, they come up here and they work it out, so they use the high school track. But it's only really cross-country. Other than that, it's open to youth sports. There are sometimes, if an after-school program wants to do something, they used to have like kickball or softball at the middle school. They would use outside, but they had to be off by 4 o'clock when times would practice.
So, George, going back to what we were talking about, we got inside and outside.
Yep.
Then we have times, like
Right.
during school, after school, and then we actually probably have schools. Because the high school is
Right.
going to be a different animal. than
Yeah, different
elementary.
animal. High school, nobody comes on, like, high school's handled by the school district only.
Right.
So that there's
Because
nothing.
of the athletic events after hours. Chris,
I was just thinking about getting into like how the fields are maintained. Can't we just use a similar language to like the safety issue, like the county safety issue that the town should? Because it feels a little funny to go beyond that on this committee to tell the towns how to maintain their fields. You know what I mean?
Right, no, I agree. So I don't think, absolutely, I don't think it's our charge to tell the towns how to maintain fields, but it's almost, as much as I personally would probably love to avoid this, I think it's unavoidable when we talk about the leases, right? Because ultimately we're saying, here, somebody owns the land, somebody's using this, someone's responsible for this. So it's how do we line that up?
I guess I'm thinking in terms of outside of that fenced-in soccer field, all the fields during the school day can and sometimes are used by the students, right? So that's what I'm saying. Those fields are maintained in a safe condition for use. Then I think that's about as far as we can take it, right?
Well, I don't know, I
But the
guess.
confusion did
Who
come
does
up.
that maintenance?
What's that?
Who does that maintenance?
Depend on the lease.
Well, that's what I figured it would be the town's job to maintain the field in safe conditions.
Right, so let me throw this out, like conceptually. Conceptually is a simplistic opportunity, because I like simple. Simple to me is good. Right, so if we're talking about inside stuff, right? To me, I'm just throwing this out there for discussion purposes. What if we said, for the inside stuff, the school is responsible for the maintenance, and the school is responsible for charging any fees, and certainly, there needs to be a fee schedule that's different for third parties than versus the towns. Again, keep it simple, right? Because again, I think what we're doing is working.
Right.
I don't think we need to, it shouldn't be charged to the towns or anything, but if you need to bring a custodial service to clean something, fine. So that's inside. Right? So that's inside. Now, outside, it's probably flipped, right? So maybe it's the town's responsibility. The towns are collecting any revenues, et cetera, associated with those fields. And the schools can use them during the school day, as they need to.
Yeah, not to throw more oil, salt on this, but like, it even got so granular as who's taking care of the trash at the baseball fields and who's taking care of the trash in the barrels at the soccer fields. So it became a thing where on Monday mornings, the custodians on sort of the school time would have to go around and make sure all of those were cleaned and taken care of because they were still on school property. But the big piece comes in when Dawn was describing that a town endeavor like soccer puts money into a field. So then, but the maintenance guys at Whitman Hanson cut the field. But then they don't irrigate, they don't water, you know what I mean? Because that's just not what they do. So where does that safety piece or whatever, because I'm sure Ms. Blackman, I know Ms. Blackman, I'm sure her level of standard of what's safe and maintained is different than anyone else. So there are some pieces that when a private group puts money into the field, and I guess you guys allowed soccer to do that on that first field, then there is something that has to be looked at.
So the question is, how much does this get spelled out in the regional agreement
That's
versus
right.
versus the individual piece, right? Is that kind of where we're going?
That's what I was thinking, and, that, I don't know, I'm trying to think about this in different ways, but it seems to me that it's up to the towns to decide how they want to maintain the fields beyond keeping them safe. And that's to be worked out with the local organizations within that town. I don't know that we can, it doesn't feel right for us to.
Because it does seem weird, because what if, do the town like soccer have to get, if they want to use the other fields, not their fenced-in field, do they pay to get the permit?
I don't believe that outside, that town teams pay to use another field. I believe that's all the outside groups
Oh, okay, makes sense.
that pay for that.
Okay.
I think they just have to cover insurance, right?
They have to maintain insurance and they contribute to field maintenance, so.
Okay.
But I don't believe that they actually pay a fee to use it.
Yeah, Chris.
Does anybody know, maybe Frank, who maintains and how that works in conjunction, the East Middle Field or the Memorial Field and the football? The town's field, nothing to do with schools, but you work with the local, youth football group, right? I'm guessing.
Right. From what I understand, that's a mix. The DPW does some of the work, and they engage landscapers to come out and do work there. I mean, half of them have some expertise in that anyway. DPW maintains the park. I'm not quite sure about Memorial Field right now.
I can tell you the Field of Dreams, Chris. So the Field of Dreams, the baseball and softball area is a combination of, like, sometimes the school department will cut the grass, but then whether it's worked out with what they have for you, they would put money in to redo rake, they would put money in to put the clay on the infield.
Who's they?
The Whitman youth
Right.
baseball,
Right.
soccer,
Yep.
baseball, softball group themselves.
Yeah.
So there is like that combination.
Right, because I'm thinking of like I've just, for the few years I was involved watching these guys maintain their fields, like there was some guys that are full of, energy and they're great, and they're like, so there's pretty extensive work being done presently to maintain, well, at least they used to be.
There is. It's
Yeah.
coming. I'll send you all in. I'm sure we're gonna get the email in the next few weeks, like field cleaning day.
Right, so if it seems to me that's a precedent that's been established, right? That these organizations work in conjunction with the town in some capacity to maintain these, and I don't know that it's our place to do anything to try to change that also.
Right.
Yeah, I think at least for the regional agreement, the 2018 language is pretty good. We probably need to spell out some differences for inside-outside use. But beyond that, everything else should be handled within the individual pieces because, say, there's different works to each of the towns, each of the buildings. Even calling versus ball, baseball fields versus just a playground.
So give me a little more, what are you thinking? Because I want to make sure we kind of, again, this is all going to be, we're going to come up with something, then we're going to send it back, so it doesn't have to hurt. But I mean, give me a little, Justin, you're thinking.
So just, within the Leeson Elementary Middle School language, something about, you know, the schools will maintain and upkeep the gymnasium, auditoriums, interior spaces. And then for playgrounds, has typically been the school's responsibility, but fields has typically been the town's. Correct.
So I
I
understood.
mean,
Yeah.
upkeep,
Upkeep.
like keeping it clean, I would assume. I mean,
Yeah.
repairs.
Maintain and manage, right? I mean, I think if we
Yeah,
say
you want the big
maintain and
mowers.
manage.
Right, yeah. We cut the grass up and we pick up the trash.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then anything beyond that.
And I do think you should have something in there about the, you know, the mutually agreed, you know, I don't want to put too specific, but the mutually agreed upon times when the school has the ability to use it for their events, and, you know, especially everything on the inside, and then they acquiesce to, you know, then the town has the ability to use it for youth leagues, you know, because there's never been a time when an outside sport has been booked, and even in the middle school, you know, there's never been that. So, I mean, I think, but that's always been just what's practiced. I
I
don't think
mean,
it's easy.
that's purely instinctive. The schools,
Right.
the schools exist for that purpose. The fields
Right,
are there to accommodate the school needs
right.
when the school needs it.
But I think the point being is, so here at the high school, that Performing Arts Center, people try to book it at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, they have an event at 4 and they want to come in at 1, and we're holding them outside until 1:45. If Whitman Middle School proceeds with the project that we hope it all proceeds with, somebody might, you know, you have to be clear that that auditorium
Yeah.
is still off limits till 4 o'clock. Because it might be being used by.
If we build what we're talking about building, there will be demands for that.
Yes,
building.
absolutely.
Right,
Yeah,
that's
but
what I'm saying.
and if we,
And I said we put George in charge.
if we,
Hey.
full
That might be on
time.
my, that might be my retirement table.
But if we say the interior of the school building shall be maintained and managed by the school district, doesn't that kind of cover it? Because again,
Yeah,
like,
it does.
again, I think it
Yeah.
works. Like it's, we've had town meetings, like
Yeah,
it's not like, oh, we did a town meeting in the high school,
Right.
you know, gym. No, like that's,
Well,
that's
even
never happened as
when
far
we
as I
have used school facilities, it's been an approach and a workout there. I mean,
make it work.
we held a meeting out in the field a couple of years ago, and we were up in the air where we were going to do it. We were going to do it in the gym, we were going to do it outside, and it was just total cooperation between the town and the schools, figuring out what was the best and highest use for it.
Right.
And if we say, you know, no outside group access until 4 o'clock and then change the start times, now it's already agreed.
But if we just say maintain and
Yeah,
manage.
maintain and manage, do
It
it
kind of
done.
covers
Yeah, that's
it.
good.
I don't think we want to get that detailed
Yeah.
in the,
The leases
Lease
can get more,
agreement.
the leases can probably be more detailed than the regional.
yeah.
Yeah, but I just want to restate that. So the plan is that we have a regional agreement by itself referencing there are leases between the town of Whitman and the town of Hanson and the school district. So a separate lease document will be sort of part of the agreement itself. The regional.
Will be referenced in
Will
the
reference.
agreement.
It'll be referenced, but again, I think there's still, I don't like punting on issues, I think there is still some issues in terms of understanding and communication and of maintenance of some of these fields.
We should probably.
However-
Those leases, yeah.
Right, however, do I think that that's the regional agreements, you know, charge to sort of? No, because we probably need like some of those sporting organizations, and we probably need Park and Rec, we need some other people besides us to have that conversation. Otherwise, I think it's gonna get weird, because they're gonna, you get their regional agreement can be avoided.
I just feel like it's not a fight. I mean,
No, but there is, right, and maybe not fight the right word, but if there are issues, I think, because there are gonna be issues, like, I hate seeing something where it's like, you know, this is gonna be a problem.
We put
I've been around-
$400,000 at the Hanson Middle School
Right.
fields, like we just described, and there's
Yeah.
gonna be, we want to keep them looking as beautiful as we can, and then how do we do that? There's gonna have to be active conversation.
I'll replace fight with jurisdiction. Like, I-
The challenge, this challenges, yeah, it might not be our challenge for the regional agreement. Okay, so we can probably come up with some language to add to the 2018 section, the references leases that talks about the interiors, the playgrounds, and then reference leases for external utilization. Okay. So that, oh, and then Frank, you sent us this. Do you want to talk about this, or is this lease agreement? You go ahead, you sent it to us.
Well, It was sent to me today. This is the draft that we requested the town council prepare for review by us and review by Desi. And I think it pretty well covers what we needed to say. Initially, my first knee-jerk reaction on a couple of things in here was, wait a minute, why are we doing this? But as I stepped away and looked back at it, it seemed to make a little more sense to me, particularly the part about leasing and subleasing.
But Frank, I guess to now our conversation, so this would actually be the lease between Whitman Hanson and the town of Whitman. Correct?
That would be the proposed lease.
Which I think we're kind of saying is going to be outside of the scope of this. Now, certainly it's good information, and certainly like someone like Jim, I don't need to drop, but you know, again, I think the more we can kind of look at templates, right, it might help. So if this is going to be the Whitman lease, you know, so the folks at Hanson may want to look at it and compare.
Correct. That's why I sent it to the whole group.
But it's not, I think what we're saying is it's not really the purview within the scope of the regional agreement committee to kind of get involved in the leases between. Some of us will be,
Well, I think
you'll be
there
involved, the
needs to be
district will be
some-
involved, and so on.
I think it needs to be some common understanding between the region and between Whitman and Hanson, because we both have
Correct.
individual concerns that we address in all leases, and we want equitable treatment.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, 100%.
And who wrote this up, your attorney?
Yep.
Yeah, he's wrong, she's wrong, they're all wrong, but we'll get it fixed in time. But I don't think we have enough time tonight to do it.
No, that's, so this is good. So we have a pretty much healthy construct of the document. The only other thing, so I have closed items here, so I'm going to update this open items with what we talked about tonight. We'll clean up the lease piece a little bit. We'll update the agreement review language a little bit. And I think we're pretty much there with a document that hopefully if we look at next time and just say we're good and come up with whatever consensus we want to ship it back to our respective groups. The only other item, I had closed it, but then I spoke to Kathleen, who, as she was sending me some of her documents, that she wanted to kind of reopen was the review of rental fees from town-owned buildings and no change to existing language, which is what we previously talked about. I think you wanted to revisit that a little bit.
I had some feedback from folks in Whitman who have watched these recordings and still want to discuss if there are 8 vacant classrooms in Whitman, where does the money go for the rental? And George, you just mentioned something about a school building use committee.
We have a school building use group that has an account. That's what comes from the high school, or things are rented out.
It's specific to the high school, it's not specific, like when Hanson rents out, it's...
It's for the district, it goes to the district.
Okay.
But if those classrooms, if we were to use classrooms, they'd be used during the day, and more likely than not, we would have a special education classroom.
Right.
Then those monies would go right into special education.
Into special education.
That's what we've done in the past. Or John, it goes into general revenue, I'm not sure, I don't want to misspeak, use my guy. So when North River rented space, right, we'd be back going to, it was some of it $10,000, so it was like $5,000 a month. If you go into general revenue, was it specified for spending?
It went into the revolving fund for building rentals.
Okay, so it went into that account. Okay.
So there's a revolving fund for building rentals that is a district-wide revolving fund.
That's right.
Okay. And what do we expend out of that account, generally highlighted?
Things that are related to the rental, because
So that's where the cleaning would be hit and things like that.
extra cleaning.
So if you look at, usually the big ticket items come in for your dance groups, for the back.
Yeah.
Lighting replacement, sound replacement, curtain replacement, stage.
Overtime.
All those
Okay.
type of things.
Really?
To that.
Yes.
And so there might be some follow-up
Any money left?
discussion.
Not really.
That's how that operates.
Oh, so now George is answering for
These
John.
folks that wanted to go back
Is
to
he
the
going to
operational budget.
Are you getting that on
Set a
tape?
revolving account here. The funds could be used to repair whatever might get broken. There's the wear and tear in the school, there's a fund there, you're not sending $5,000 plus review.
Correct. Okay, good. So then I think we need to do a couple updates here. We will not meet next Monday because it's
What do you mean? Oh,
President's Day. Sorry, Chris, I know, now just one Monday, Chris, not two, not three, just one. And
If I'm
then,
on vacation, all bets are off.
and then the following Monday, which is the 27th, hopefully we can just, again, kind of have a red line of this, agree to it, and at that point, we should be able to take a little bit of a break from doing this to then do this with our respective groups. Does that sound good?
Yes.
All right. Okay, Ms. Stephanie, did I miss anything? Good. All right. With that, motion to adjourn, anyone?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor? Wonderful. Good night, everyone. Thank you.